Hi everyone, I want to look at Zecharyah today, and yes, we're going to look at the second Exodus and see if there's something about the Battle of Gog of Magog. I'm going to also mention verses that is important or that I find interesting in this prophet. It's a bit a longer prophet book than the ones around it, like Zecharyah and Habakkuk, and much shorter, and even Jonah, Nahum. Okay, so let's start 2 verse 10. Rejoice and be glad, daughter of Zion. Zion always refers to Yahweh's mountain. At the moment I believe it is the Rwenzori mountains in the middle of Africa on the equator. I think that is Mount Zion. Well, one of those mountains there, because it's like a cluster of mountains together, 5 of them. Remember that David said Jerusalem is surrounded by mountains. And of course we don't see any mountains in the fake Jerusalem today, only a few hills. And I just going to mention too that of course also according to the Bible, Jerusalem is next to the Nile River, if you didn't know that. That's in 2 Chronicles, I think 32 verse 30. 2 verse 10, Rejoice and be glad, O daughter of Zion, for behold, I come and will dwell in the midst of you, says Yahweh. Physically, Yahweh's presence is going to dwell physically in the midst of the remnant of Israel in the future. The prophets also says that he is going to rule from the bottom part of Africa, from sea to sea, and from the river, and I believe that meaning the river Nile, which ends on the equator today, and from the river to the end of the land in the south, to the South Sea. So the territory Yahweh is going to rule from is surrounded by sea and only has a border on the north, a land border on the north. So it's a east and west sea and a south sea. Of course that means it cannot be the fake Israel there by Palestine, which only has a sea on the west side. And yes, I've got a big video on this. If you want to have a look at that, I'll give you the scriptures there. And many nations shall flee for refuge to Yahuwah in that day. Many nations, but remember, Yahuwah is going to gather the remnant of Israel from these nations. Not everybody in those nations are going to flee. Yahuwah is not going to allow that. Only the remnant who listens to his voice, who keeps his commandments. As we see in the other prophets, it clearly states that only a handful, only a few, not all of them are going to be gathered. It also says in another prophet that it is the sheep, and we know that sheep listens to Yahweh's voice. And you shall know, and they shall dwell in the midst of you. Talking about Israel territory, the original, which is in the bottom part of Africa, not the fake one in Israel, fake one in Palestine. And you shall know that Yahuwah Almighty has sent me to you, and Yahuwah shall inherit Judah, his portion in the Holy Land, and he will yet choose Jerusalem. And Yahuwah shall inherit Judah, his portion in the Holy Land. Wow, that's amazing. At the moment I have the equator of Africa where Judah's territory was. Remember, there's 12 to 13 sons. There's 12 sons, but then Joseph had Ephraim and Manasseh, which was adopted by Jacob. So you could say there's 13 sons. But Judah's territory, according to my investigation, is on the equator, which means Yahuwah is inheriting Judah's portion. We meaning he is gonna sit right in the middle of Africa on the equator. Oh, that's awesome, amazing. That's also how I had it before I saw this verse, that it's going to be in the middle, and there's going to be 6 nations above it and 6 below, or 6 and 7, or depending on how you are. I think Ephraim and Manasseh falls under one. So let's continue. And Yahweh shall inherit Judah, his portion in the Holy Land, and he will yet choose Jerusalem. Let all flesh fear before Yahweh. To fear Yahweh means you keep his commandments, for he has risen up from his holy clouds, set apart clouds. Let's move this here. 6 verse 11 to 12. And you shall take silver and gold and make crowns, and you shall put them upon the head of Joshua, the son of Jehozadak, the high priest. And you shall say to him, Thus says Yahuwah Almighty, Behold, a man whose name is the branch, and he shall spring up from his stem and build the house of Yahuwah. You see, this is from the Greek Septuagint, so that's why they say here Jesus, but in the English it says Joshua, which is a reference to Yahushua. That's the original name of the Son, the Messiah. And here, this is a prophecy to tell us what will the Messiah's name be. It says here, put a crown upon the head of Yahushua, the son of Jehozadak, the high priest. And you shall say to him, Thus says Yahuwah Almighty. This is what Yahweh says about his name. Behold, a man whose name is the branch's name. Look at the man whose name is the same as the branch's name. The Bible says the branch, it means Messiah. It always refers to the Messiah. So he clearly states here that Yahushua is the name of the Messiah. If you wanted proof of that. It's not Jesus. Jesus doesn't mean Yahuwah saves. We see in the angel told Mary in Matthew 1:21 that his name will mean salvation, which is Yeshua. 7 verse 14. Thou wilt cast them out among all the nations, whom they know not, and the land behind them shall be made utterly destitute of any going through or returning. Yes, they have made the choice land a desolation. Now, this is the state Jerusalem and the surrounding territories are in now. It's desolate. There are no Israelites there today. It's desolate, destroyed, and only after the second Exodus will those areas be re-inhabited and rebuilt. I've got a video specifically going through all these scriptures that mentions its desolation, and scriptures that talks about, in context, talks about the second Exodus and the future. 8 verse 1 to 23. This is the second Exodus chapter. And the word of Yahweh Almighty came, saying, Thus says Yahweh Almighty, I have been jealous for Jerusalem and for Zion with great jealousy, and I have been jealous for her with great fury. Thus says Yahweh, I will return to Zion, and dwell in the midst of Jerusalem, and Jerusalem shall be called a true city, and the mountain of Yahuwah Almighty a holy mountain. Thus says Yahuwah Almighty. We see again Yahweh says that he is going to dwell in the place, in the area where the real Israel territory is, and Jerusalem. As I said, there's prophecies that says where the Israelites will gather and where Yahweh will reign from, and we can see that it is in the bottom of Africa according to the prophecies. You can watch my other videos on these subjects. I prove it there. It's not by Palestine. Yahuwah is not going to go dwell there in the desert. His mountain isn't there. Thus says Yahuwah Almighty, there shall yet dwell old men and old women in the streets of Jerusalem, everyone holding his staff in the hand for age. And the broad places of the city shall be filled with boys and girls playing in the streets thereof. Thus says Yahuwah Almighty, if it shall be impossible in the sight of the remnant of this people in those days, shall it also be impossible in my sight? See, he's talking about the remnant of Israel. The remnant of my people is the remnant of Israel. If it's impossible for them, does it mean it's impossible for Yahuwah? No, it's not. At the moment, when we look at the situation in the world and in South Africa, where the second Exodus is going to go to, it looks impossible. It doesn't look like it can happen there. It doesn't look like people would go there in the future for a refuge, to be saved and protected by Yahuwah, because it's all a lot of evil spirits there, and yes, it's a very evil place at the moment. But yeah, for Yahuwah nothing is impossible, and in future he will accomplish this, since, as he said, he is jealous for Jerusalem and Zion. He wants to gather his remnant of Israel there. He wants to make that covenant with them. And this is a event to be fulfilled very soon. And I'm grateful that Yahuwah is revealing this to me. I believe he's doing that so that I can share it with you lot, with everyone else who wants to listen. That you know where you should go in future if you have the opportunity to flee your countries because of war. Because war is coming to all the Israelite countries in the world. That is all of Europe, UK, United Kingdom, and Americas. Okay. Shall it also be impossible in my sight? Says Yahuwah Almighty. Thus say Yahuwah Almighty, behold, I will save my people from the east country and the west country, and I will bring them in, and cause them to dwell in the midst of Jerusalem. And they shall be to me a people, and I will be to them a Elohim, in truth and in righteousness, in law and law obedience. Truth definition in the Bible is the law. We see that in Psalm 119, I think it's 142 and 151. And then righteousness is law obedience. It's Isaiah 51 verse 7, Deuteronomy 6 verse 25, Luke 1 verse 7. So yes, Yahweh will be Elohim to them, since they also obey his laws in truth and righteousness. So they will be obeying his commands. And that's also why he will be there, to rule in their country over the whole earth. We clearly can see this is a future event, because it says he will gather the people to one place, to the real desolate Jerusalem. Verse 9, thus say Yahweh Almighty, let your hands be strong, yet you that hear in these days these words out of my mouth and of the prophets, from the day that the house of Yahuwah Almighty was founded, and from the time that the temple was built. For before those days the wages of men could not be profitable, and there could be no hire of cattle. There could be no peace by reason of the affliction to him that went out, or to him that came in. For I would have let loose all men, every one against his neighbor. But now I will not do to the remnant of this people, to the remnant of Israel, according to the former days. Yahweh is going to do a different thing, and we see in the other prophets that They will rule, they will live there forever. It won't be destroyed again forever. That's amazing. Again, showing that this is talking about the second Exodus. It's talking about the regathering of the remnant of Israel to the original territories of Israel in Africa. But I will show peace. The vine shall yield its fruit, and the land shall yield their produce. The heavens shall give its dew, and I will give as an inheritance all these things to the remnant of Israel. It keeps saying the remnant of Israel, because only a remnant of them will be gathered with the second Exodus. And it shall come to pass, as you were a curse among the nations, O house of Judah and house of Israel, you could say house of Ephraim, so will I save you, and you shall be a blessing. Be of good courage and strengthen your hands. Yes, where you were a curse before, that people were cursed because they didn't want to obey Yahweh's commands. And the remnant of them that obeys his commands, they will be regathered in the original territory. First it will be South Africa, and there Yahweh will make a covenant, and they will move back into Yahweh's promised land in the bottom part of Africa. Only a remnant people. If you don't keep the commandments, you won't be considered. Sorry, it doesn't work like that. Clearly, the prophet says that these people keeps his commandments. So if you don't have any desire to obey his commands, you can't be a remnant. If you make fun of his name and don't want to call him on his name, you're not going to be a remnant. If you don't want to rest on his Sabbath, Saturdays, you're not going to be a remnant. If you eat pork, unclean animals, you're not going to be a remnant. For thus says Yahweh Elohim Almighty, as I took counsel to afflict you when your fathers provoked me. How did they provoke him? They didn't obey his commands. Say Yahweh Almighty, and I repented not. So have I prepared and taken counsel in these days to do good to Jerusalem and to the house of Judah. Be you of good courage. These are the things which you shall do. Speak truth, every one with his neighbor. Judge truth and peaceable. Judgment in your gates, and let none of you devise evil in his heart against his neighbor, and love not a false oath. For all these things I hate, says Yahweh Almighty. And the word of Yahweh Almighty came to me, saying, Thus says Yahweh Almighty, the fourth fast, and the fifth fast, and the seventh fast, and the 10th fast shall be to the house of Judah for joy and gladness, and for good feasts, and you shall rejoice and love you the truth and peace. Yes, these people will love the law, they will love the truth and have peace, and Yahweh will accept their feasts, their festivals, and they will gladly fast. When I read this now, I thought about the book of Thomas. See if I've got it here. I don't. Let's see if I can find it quickly. I want to read something from it, which was very interesting. The Gospel of Thomas. And I wanted to read here verse 27, talking about fasting and the Sabbath. Joshua said, If you fast not from this world, you will not find the kingdom. If you keep not the Sabbath as Sabbath, you will not see the Father. How powerful is that? Is this a reason that why they removed this or never put this gospel in the Bible in the first place? Because it's so straightforward? Maybe it's the reason. Because wow, this is powerful. If you're not willing to keep the Sabbath, you won't see the Father. And another translation, it says you won't know the Father. And Joshua said this. And this fasting of the world, I was reminded of the verse that says, If you love the world and the things of this world, then you are an enemy of Yahuwah. And I think this is what it boils down to. If you love the things of this world, you are an enemy of Yahuwah. When he says fast from the world. Don't get too entangled with the things of this world. Don't lose focus. Focus on Yahuwah and His word and His commands. It's more important. Where were we? Yes. Verse 20, Thus says Yahuwah Almighty, Yet shall many peoples come, and the inhabitants of the many cities, and the inhabitants of 5 cities shall come together to one city, saying, Let us go to make supplication to Yahuwah, and to seek the face of Yahuwah Almighty. I will go also, and many peoples and many nations shall come to seek earnestly the face of Yahuwah Almighty in Jerusalem, on the equator, and to obtain favor of Yahuwah. Thus says Yahuwah Almighty, In those days my word shall be fulfilled, in 10 men of all the languages of the nations should take hold, even take hold of them, the hem of a Yehudim, of an true Israelite, not the Jews, fake Jews, saying, We will go with you, for we have heard that Yahuwah is with you. They will desire to be able to go and live in that territory of Yahuwah, in the promised land, and they will grab the hem of the garments of these true believers and beg that they can go with them to the blessed land. Amazing. And yes, and the other prophets, it says that people will gather, they have to come to that territory, or to where Yahuwah is, in the middle of there by Africa, from Sabbath to Sabbath, and feast to feast. They're going to have to come every Feast of Tabernacles to Yahuwah to receive blessings. And it also means Sabbath to Sabbath. Some will go Sabbath to Sabbath. So it must be a place that's easily accessible for everyone on earth. And that's why I believe it is, well, according to prophecy, it is in the middle of Africa, or the bottom part of Africa. It's easy accessible for the nations on the west and the nations on the east, because Africa is like in the middle. That's why South Africa is one of the only routes from one side to the other side, besides the Suez Channel. If there is no Suez Channel, then South Africa is the only way to get from east to west, and west to east. Yes, that's prophecy of the second Exodus, future events, and the blessed land where Yahweh is going to rule from, and people are going to come and see Yahweh and ask for His blessings. When you look at Africa and South Africa today, you can't see this ever happening, but yes, like Yahweh said, nothing's impossible for Him. 9 verse 1 to 2. Okay, now this is in yellow, so that's not for this video. 9 verse 9 to 13. I think this is the last one. Rejoice greatly, O daughter of Zion, proclaim it aloud, O daughter of Jerusalem. Behold, the King is coming to you, just and a Saviour. He is meek and riding on an ass, and a young foal. This is of course fulfilled with Joshua riding into Jerusalem back in the day. And it's like a paradigm shift. If you know that Jerusalem there by Palestine is fake, it's like a paradigm shift. It's difficult to imagine Joshua actually doing this in the middle of Africa. Yes. If you grew up being taught that it's actually there in Western Asia, much like they brainwash the children with the spinning ball. And he shall destroy the chariots out of Ephraim, and the horse out of Jerusalem, and the bow of war shall be utterly destroyed, and there shall be abundance in peace out of the nations. And he shall rule over the waters as far as the sea, and the rivers to the ends of the earth. This earth here is land. If we look it up, you can go look it up. End of the land. In the other translations it will say from sea to sea. You will rule from sea to sea, and from the river to the end of the land. Verse 10, 9 verse 10. Let's look at this. I will cut off the chariot from Ephraim. Yes. His dominion shall be from sea to sea, and from the river to the ends of the land. So from the east to west sea, and from the river at the north to the south sea. That's what it says. Hallelujah. There you have it. That's where he's going to rule from, and that is the bottom part of Africa. Most of the Bible plays out in Africa. Just about everything, except for Mount Sinai, which was in Arabia. And then they re-entered Africa at the bottom of Arabia, after they've been to Sinai. Because the real Mount Sinai is at the bottom of Arabia. I've found it. I've got a video on that. And you by the blood of your covenant has set forth the prisoners out of the pit that has no water. You shall dwell in strongholds, you prisoners of the congregation, and for 1 day of your captivity I will recompense you double. For I have bent you, O Judah, for myself as a bow. I have filled Ephraim, and I will raise up your children, O Zion, against the children of the Greeks, and I will handle thee as the sword of a warrior. Basically what it means is that Israel will be the strongest nation because Yahweh was on their side in the future. The most blessed place. 10 verse 6 to 12. And I will strengthen the house of Judah and save the house of Joseph, and I will settle them. He's referring to Ephraim. And I will settle them in the bottom part of Africa, of course, because I have loved them, and they shall be as if I had not cast them off. For I am Yahuwah their Elohim, and I will hear them. And they shall be as the warriors of Ephraim, and their hearts shall rejoice as with wine. Their children also shall see it and be glad, and their hearts shall rejoice in Yahuwah. I will make a sign to them and gather them in, for I will redeem them, and they shall be multiplied according to their number before. So that's why Yahweh says it will be like before. There will be millions gathered together, the real Israelites, as before. But this time they will obey Yahuwah. And I will sow them among the people, and they that are afar off shall remember me. They shall nourish their children, and they shall return. Yes, they will. I believe this could refer to them teaching the children the ways of Yahweh, and they will return to the promised land. That's also what I try to teach my children, the word of Yahweh, which is according to the law that what we should do. And I will bring them again from the land of Egypt. Also could refer to the land of slavery, captivity, which is the whole world today, if you look at it. And I will gather them in from among the Assyrians, and I will bring them also land of captivity. Remember, Egypt and Assyrians took Israelites captive, or made them slaves. And I will bring them into the land of Gilead and Lebanon, and there shall not even one of them be left behind. and they shall pass through a narrow sea. They shall smite the waves in the sea, and all the deep places of the river shall be dried up, and all the pride of the Assyrians shall be taken away, and the scepter of Egypt shall be removed. And I will strengthen them in Yahuwah their Elohim, and they shall boast in his name, says Yahuwah. 11 verse 1 to 3. Open the doors, O Lebanon, and let the fire devour the cedars. Let the pine howl, because the cedars has fallen, for the mighty men have been greatly afflicted. Howl, you oaks of the land of Bashan, for the thickly planted forest has been torn down. Remember in scripture, a lot of times the Bible used trees to talk about peoples, nations, descendants. And again, it talks about cedars, but it refers to the tall people of Og of Bashan. It's going to be that were conquered in the end. So a lot of them Yahuwah killed himself, but also Israel conquered them before they entered the promised land. In another video I showed where Og of Bashan used to live in Africa. It is in Somalia. There is a voice of the shepherds mourning, for the greatness is brought low, a voice of roaring lions, for the pride of Jordan is brought down. And this for me shows that the Jordan River, which you can't find today, is because Africa is dried up. Now it seems that Jordan was in the vicinity of Og of Bashan's area. I believe the Jordan River was there by Kenya. Well, like I said, it's impossible to know where. The only thing really you can find of the original territories is mountains, because they don't move around or dry up like rivers. So you can find the mountains of the Bible. 12 verse 1. The burden of the word of Yahuwah of Israel, for Israel, says Yahuwah, that stretches out the sky, and lays the foundation of the earth, and forms the spirit of man within him. See here, it stretches out the dome over the earth. It's like an incubator, a terrarium. Do you know what's a terrarium? See? Terrarium. This is an enclosed ecosystem, basically. It's not open at the top, the one we live in. Earth, it's enclosed. You see here? Examples of terrariums. That's what we are living in. Like I said, ours is closed up at the moment. Yes. Anyway, there's a terrarium. 12 verse 8 and 9. And it shall come to pass in the days that Yahuwah shall defend the inhabitants of Jerusalem, and the weak one among them in that day shall be as David, and the house of David as the house of Yahuwah, as the angel of Yahuwah before them. And it shall come to pass in that day that I will seek to destroy all the nations that come against Jerusalem. Talking about Gog of Magog, and Yahuwah will destroy them. Remember, they're going to attack, and Yahuwah is going to destroy them. 13 verse 1 to 2. In that day a fountain shall be opened for the house of God and for the inhabitants of Jerusalem, for sin and for uncleanness. It shall be in that day, says Yahuwah of hosts, that I will cut off the names of the idols from the land, and they shall no longer be remembered. I will also cause the prophets and the unclean spirit to depart from the land. Yes, today by a lot of unclean spirits in Africa, because the blacks there in Africa dabble a lot in voodoo and ancestral worship or prayers, talking to the ancestors, which are evil spirits, They drink animal blood and go see the witch doctors, do curses and stuff. So yes, there's a lot of evil spirits there. And this says that Yahweh is going to remove all evil spirits from the bottom part of Africa where the territory of Israel is. That's going to be amazing. So that's also clearly a future event. Something like this hasn't happened yet. And we see in Exodus 23:13 it talks about not naming the names of false deities. Yahweh says here that he's going to remove the names of those false deities and their signia from the bottom part of Africa. 14 verse 1, it's like the totem poles, for instance, too. They also have the masks and poles and stuff. That's going to be removed. 14 verse 1 to 21. Behold, a day of Yahweh is coming when you plunder. Yes, this is the last one. Behold, the day of Yahweh is coming when your plunder will be divided in your presence. For I will gather all the nations for battle against Jerusalem, and the city will be captured, the houses looted, and the women ravished. Half of the city will go into exile, but the rest of the people will not be removed from the city. Then Yahweh will go out to fight against those nations, as clear as nations, not just one nation, as he fights in the day of battle. And this battle Yahweh himself is going to fight. So this is clearly not something that has happened before. On that day his feet will stand on the Mount of Olives. As I said, this hasn't happened yet. Here he stands on the Mount of Olives, east of Jerusalem, so east of the Mount Zion. The Mount of Olives will be split in two from east to west, so this hasn't happened yet, forming a great valley, with half the mountain moving to the north and half to the south. You will flee by my mountain valley, for it will extend to Azal. You will flee as you fled from the earthquake in the days of Uzziah, king of Judah. Then Yahuwah, my Elohim, will come, and all the holy ones with him. So Yahuwah returning with his saints. Hallelujah. This sounds wonderful. These saints has been ruling with Yahuwah during the millennial kingdom, and now here it says that they will return with him, this time with this battle of Gog of Magog. On that day there will be no light, no cold or frost. It will be as a day known only to Yahweh, be a day only known to Yahweh, without day or night. But when evening comes, there will be light. I think because of Yahweh's presence, there will still be light when it's supposed to get dark. And on that day, living water will flow out from Jerusalem, half of it toward the east sea and the other half towards the west sea. Maybe this also has to do with the Mount of Olives being split in two, the water running through that area. But on the equator, it seems that there will be a river, new river, from a spring, of course, coming out of the earth. The water will flow to the east and west along the equator of Africa to the seas on both sides. In summer and winter alike, it will always flow. On that day Yahweh will become king over all the earth. Yahweh alone, and his name alone. So yes, do you believe me now? This is a future event. This is when Yahweh is going to rule over the whole earth. This is clearly right at the end of this timeline we are on. Right at the end. This must still happen. But actually it's soon compared to where we are on the timeline. If you consider more than 7,000 years have passed, this is like a drop in the bucket in time. Yes, we have just... I think these things could be fulfilled within the next 50 years. Imagine that, 50 years. Can you imagine that? Basically, you could say in our lifetime. this generation, all these things could fulfill. Because if we look at where we are, Gog of Magog, who it is, he is already busy conquering. He's already busy taking countries. Well, he's with one country now, but he will attack the other countries. He will conquer them too. Not even on his own. The BRICS nations will fight with him, but he will conquer many nations. So that's where we are now. That's it's right at the end. So soon the second Exodus will happen when these wars comes to these nations. That's when they will flee. So yes, everything is right around the corner. Wow, this is the time we are living in. Yahuwah returning and ruling from the bottom part of Africa as king of the earth. Yo. How awesome is that going to be? And as I said in the beginning, he says his territory is going to be what Judah used to have in the past. And I said it's by the equator. And here he says that the river will flow east and west to the seas from Jerusalem, which is by Mount Zion, which is on the equator. The Mount Ruwenzori. It's either that mountain or Mount Kenya, but I think it's Mount Ruwenzori. A very, very special mountain. And all the land from Geba to Rimmon, south of Jerusalem, will be turned into a plain. So Yahweh is going to level the area below Jerusalem to the south. But not all of it, but just probably next to Jerusalem. But Jerusalem will be raised up and will remain in her place. So Jerusalem will lift up higher than it is at the moment. Well, it's desolate at the moment, but we'll see in the future when it's been rebuilt. From the Benjamin gate to the site of the first gate to the corner gate, and from the tower of Hananel to the royal wine presses, people will live there, and never again will there be an utter destruction. See, this is right at the end, after everything's happened. This is the last play. And the people will, this is where the storybooks where you see, and they lived happily ever after. This is exactly where we are in the timeline with this prophecy. So Jerusalem will dwell securely, and this will be the plague with which Yahuwah strikes all the peoples who have warred against Jerusalem. These Gog of Magog nations, all who played part of that, who attacked and ravished the women and took some of them captives and so on. Their flesh will rot while they stand on their feet. Their eyes will rot in their sockets, and their tongues will rot in their mouths. Well, that's scary, eh? They're gonna die while living. They're gonna... It's like... what could this be? A flesh-eating virus? That's what I was talking about. This is another way Yahuwah is going to use fire, but also this flesh-eating virus to kill these people who attacks Jerusalem and Israel in the future. On that day a great panic from Yahuwah will come upon them, so that each will seize the hand of another. They will attack each other. Like in the Bible, in the Old Testament, remember? There was a nation that they started attacking each other. I think was it with Gideon, and blew the trumpets and stuff, and these people attacked each other. And the hand of one will rise against the hand of against the other. Judah will also fight at Jerusalem, and the wealth of all the surrounding nations will be collected, gold, silver and apparel in the great abundance. Remember, all of this plays out at the same time. Same time in our timeline, more or less. This big battle, Yahuwah ruling from that area, the rivers starting to flow east and west from Jerusalem in the middle of Africa. the geography changing, it lowering below Jerusalem and rising where Jerusalem is, so it's higher up. The Mount of Olives tearing into two parts, going north and south, the two parts. Then all the survivors, I also want to mention here, so the Israelites, they will also fight. It's not just Yahuwah it seems that it's going to fight. Some of the other prophets makes it look like only Yahuwah is going to step in and do everything. But we can see in Zecharyah, it talks about also the Israelites fighting against these nations. But of course with Yahuwah's help they will gain the upper hand. Then all the survivors from the nations that came against Jerusalem will go up year after year to worship the King, Yahuwah of hosts, and to celebrate the feasts of tabernacles. Remember, I mentioned this earlier. They will go up all the time, so it must be easily accessible, and that's why I say it's right in the middle. It's in Africa, middle of Africa. And should any of the families of the earth not go up to Jerusalem to worship the King, Yahuwah of hosts, then the rain will not fall on them. I think some thought that this was for the millennial kingdom, but it's not. It's for the end of the age, after the millennial kingdom. It is the end of the short season of deception Revelation 20 talks about. All these things. And if the people of Egypt will not go up and enter in, then the rain will not fall on them. And it says go up and enter in. In the Bible, when it says go up, it means south, going south, and when it says going down, it means going north. When Abraham went down to Egypt, he went up north to Egypt, and he left going up south. It says there go check Genesis 13, verse 1, I think. It says there that Abraham left Egypt south, going south to Canaan. So Canaan is below Egypt in Africa, according to that verse. And here it says that Egypt, which is above the territory of Israel at the moment, they will go up south to enter that territory, which is also still in Africa. They're going south to the equator. You could say that's another proof, really, if you want to. This will be the plague with which Yahweh strikes the nations who do not go up to celebrate the Feasts of Tabernacles. This will be the punishments of Egypt and all the nations that do not go up to celebrate the Feast of Tabernacles. On that day, set apart to Yahweh, will be inscribed on the bells of the horses, and the cooking pots in the house of Yahweh will be like the sprinkling bells before the altar. Indeed, every pot in Jerusalem and Judah will be holy to Yahuwah of hosts, and all who sacrifice will come and take some pots and cook in them. And on that day there will no longer be a Canaanite in the house of Yahuwah of hosts. So this specific group of people will not ever be allowed in Yahuwah's territory, in the house of Yahweh. So they won't be allowed in certain areas that belongs to Yahuwah. If it's the whole New Jerusalem, probably, I think, but because remember that will also be placed in the middle of Africa. Yeah. I showed on an old picture that I created how big it is, and I don't have it now at the moment. Yeah, I don't have it at the moment, but yes, it's going to be probably in the middle of Africa. That's where Yahweh is going to settle, in the old territory of Judah. and the Canaanites will not be allowed in. Now you wonder, who's the Canaanites? It's who knows? Yahuwah will know. Anyway, that is Zecharyah for you. It's a long video, eh? It's almost an hour. Wow. Alright, thanks for sticking around, and enjoy your day. As we saw, this is a future event, all these things, but still be fulfilled, and that proves that full preterism isn't true, because these things haven't happened yet. Yahweh hasn't settled down in the world to rule from it yet, physically, which this is talking about. Okay, so enjoy your day. Yahuwah bless, and we talk again with Malachi. Bye.